Ya Rasulallah, Ya Habiballah, Ya Rasulallah, Ya Habiballah. Salam alayk, Ya Nabi, salam alayk, Ya Rasul, salam alayk, salawatullah alayk, salam alayk, Ya Nabi, salam alayk, Ya Rasul, salam alayk, salawatullah. Salam alayk Mustafa khairul wara go sarwar gardo sara ho Mustafa khairul wara go sarwar gardo sara ho apne achon ka tasadduq hum badon ko bhi nivaho Salam alayk ya nabi salam alayk ya rasul salam alayk salawatullah Salam alayk, Ya Nabi, salam alayk, Ya Rasul, salam alayk, salawatullah alayk, salam alayk. Milke khas kibriya ho, malik ghar ma siwa ho. Milke khas kibriya ho, malik ghar.
I call upon the Honourable Shaykh Asrar Rashid to come before us and share his thoughts. Nara Takbir, Nara Risalat, Nara Risalat.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa afdalus salati wa tammu taslim ala ashrafil anbiya'i Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكرك الغافلون. In theology, علم الكلام, the first attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we learn is sifatul wujud. We say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. And the evidence given by the mutakallimun, the theologians, generally in the books is wujudu hadhil makhluqat, which means the very existence of creation. The very fact that we have creation points out to the existence, the divine existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the existence of the Creator. And the reasoning behind this is based upon the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ, that do not follow that which you do not have knowledge regarding. Meaning the very belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is built upon ilm. وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ, do not follow that which you do not have knowledge of. So the foundation of Islamic creed is built upon knowledge, ilm. And atheists would claim that theology, whether that be scriptural theology or natural theology, is based upon superstition. When perusing the books of Islam, we realize, starting from the Quran, that the Quran calls us to the way of knowledge, ilm. Like in the verse recited, do not follow that which you do not have knowledge of. And we know even the scholars like Al-Imam Ibrahim al-Bajuri and Al-Imam Ibrahim al-Laqani in Jawharatul Tawheed states that the one who blind follows in his faith will never cease to be in doubt regarding his Creator. This is something which the theologians debate. They say, if someone blindly believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is his faith valid or not? They discuss this. Is the belief of such a person valid? And the conclusion that they come to is that anyone who blindly follows and believes is sinful because he has not followed the way of knowledge, the way of ilm, which the Quran tells us to follow, that we must believe with ilm, with knowledge. the scholars developed different methods of deducing the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through methods of knowledge, logical deduction. And this was not based upon Socratic logic or Aristotelian logic, Greek logic. No, this was taken from Al-Quran al-Karim itself. For instance, they had Burhan al-Talazum. Burhan al-Talazum or Al-Qiyas. Burhan al-Talazum is mental association of something. For instance, if you see an ambulance, when you see an ambulance, you will observe an ambulance and you will make the mental association of a person who has fallen ill and an ambulance has been called and this ambulance is heading towards that sick or ill person. This is a mental association known as luzum. And this is one way of inferring an argument. In the same way, for instance, if you go to a village, you see buildings, and when you see buildings, you will deduce from that there are people who live inside of that village. This is a deduction. This is valid deduction. This is known as at-talazum and al-qiyas, generally translated as analogy. This is something which the scholars considered valid in making a deductive argument. Now, when we say we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the atheists will claim that our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is superstition, or our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is built upon blind faith. We as Muslims are obligated to answer these objections. And our ulama, our scholars, developed arguments like tarjih bila murajjih. This is an impossibility. Tarjih bila murajjih. What does this mean? Can you have something existing without a cause? This is a debate which theologians have with atheists. Does everything have a cause? Muslims will say yes. And remember, when we analyze the arguments of the Muslims, the theologians specifically, we will notice that all the arguments are something known as badhi. What do we mean by badhi? Something that is intuitively understood. For instance, this hall is too hot, it is humid. This is something you understand. I do not need to define to you what I mean by humid or too hot. This is something intuitive. So our arguments are based upon intuitive arguments, things which are understood. One of those arguments is the causal factor, that everything has a cause. Everything around us has a cause. And even Newtonian physics, some aspects of Newtonian physics would accept this. So how is this taken from the Quran? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in Surah Al-Insan or Surah Al-Dahr, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Has, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks istifham inkari, has a time, a short period of time come upon humanity that they were something non-existing? What does this question mean? This question means that you, O human being, there was a time when you did not exist and someone brought you into existence. So the scholars deduce from this that you cannot have tarjih bila murajjih, a cause without someone causing that thing. This is a basic rule. Or for instance, the verse of the Quran, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. Were they created from nothing, or are they the creators? Two options are given to humanity. You were either created from nothing, or you yourself created yourself. Both of these are false. Why? Because if you are created from nothing, this is tarjih bila murajjih, a cause, an effect without a cause. And if you created yourself, then this would lead to circular reasoning, which is also an impossibility. So the only third option would be that someone else made you and created you, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this points out to wujud. Now, based upon this, someone may object. That objection is that I was created by someone, but someone must have created them. Like Richard Dawkins is infamous for saying, and apart from Richard Dawkins, who discovered the double helix, Watson and Crick. One of the two, Watson I think, said that it is feasible, it is possible that an alien life form could have created us or placed the early forms of life on earth. So the question would arise, who created that alien life form? Now the scholars developed another argument, which is the impossibility of something known as tasalsul. What do we mean by tasalsul? Continuous regression. That continuous regression is something impossible. For instance, if your neighbor has a plant, and you go to your neighbor and you say, where did you get this plant from? He says, I received a portion of that plant from my neighbor. So you go to that neighbor and you ask him, where did you get that piece of plant? He says, from the neighbor next door. You continue doing so without getting to the original plant. This is something impossible. Tasalsul, continuous regression. There would have to be a point where everything starts. For instance, if you have multiple zeros, a number 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, at one point there must be a number that starts, otherwise they all count for nothing. Now everything around us is counted as being contingent. What do we mean by contingent? We mean existence after non-existence. Everything did not exist and came into existence. This is observable, that the universe is contingent. It is possible. We wouldn't say it's impossible or necessary. The universe around us is possible. Something possible would have to have been caused. Now, if someone states that the cause of the universe is also caused, this would lead to regression. Tasalsul. The cause, if the cause is caused, then that cause is caused. Then that cause is caused. And then that cause is caused. We would have to stop at the initial cause, which is self-sufficient. The initial cause, which is omnipotent. The initial cause, which is uncaused, the uncaused causer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this argument was known as tasalsul, but another logical fallacy, which the logical fallacies number over 49, as previous speakers mentioned, that there are logical fallacies, but another logical fallacy which is mentioned by the theologians is the logical fallacy of dawr. What is dawr? Dawr is circular reasoning. For instance, I say A caused B and B caused A. So A caused B and B caused A. This is impossible. So the scholars said it would be impossible for us to say that nature caused itself. This is something we know intuitively. So anyone who rejects faith, belief in a creator, like our atheist counterparts, or many young Muslims who have left Islam, former Muslims, within the UK, they would reject basic intuitive things. The dawr argument, circular reason, could also be if someone says A caused B, B caused C, and then C caused A, then A caused B, and you can make this longer. The reasoning could be longer. This, if you look at all the scientific arguments that people present, they would all fall into this category. Another point which the scholars point out is something some have termed as illatun gha'iyah. This term is debatable, but we would say what the term means is that everything around us has a purpose. Now, some of you who study philosophy or study religious studies in colleges, you will know that David Hume and other philosophers attempted to destroy the design argument or the cosmological argument, and they refuted the likes of William Paley. But a simple example will do away with their argument. Now, what does the design argument or the cause argument entail? This entails that everything around us has a purpose. There is design in creation. Now, someone may point out faults or apparent faults in some aspects of the creation around us. How do you answer them? For instance, if you say to them that the force of gravity is just right, if gravity was weaker, human beings would not be able to survive on Earth. They would float away into space. In fact, they would not exist in the first place. If gravity was stronger, then human beings would be squashed to the ground. Or if you said that the proximity of the sun, if it was slightly closer, people on Earth would be burnt to the ground, to ashes. Or if the sun was further, the Earth would be frozen over. Now, when you present these arguments to an atheist, the atheist will say that these things are by pure chance. And to counter your argument, they will give examples of imperfection or perceived imperfection in creation. How do you answer them? The answer is very simple. Their reasoning is the reasoning of a man who goes to a building like this masjid, sees that the walls are built finely, the ceiling has been raised, everything is good and perfect, there is a carpet, and he sees a nail in the wall. He sees a nail in the wall, he goes up to that nail and he says, why is this nail in the wall? What purpose does this have? Now, some of the evolutionists, they have a dislike for the term Darwinism because it's outdated. They point at vestigial organs which have no apparent use in the human body, even though later some people found a use for those organs. Their similitude is such that when they observe something in creation they do not know the purpose of, their similitude is like the man who goes to a building and he sees something, he doesn't recognize the purpose of that thing and therefore states that the entire building has no cause. Now, some people may question the divine existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, the theologians categorized everything in existence. You should memorize this. They categorized everything in existence as either being possible, impossible, or is necessary. Everything in creation is categorized as being possible, impossible, or necessary. When we say the divine creator exists, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessary, wajibul wujud. Everything in creation around us is possible. Why? Because imagine creation to be like a scale. Imagine creation to be like a scale. The scale has two hands or two cups, either coming into existence or going out of existence. Now, someone must come and tip the scale to give preference to one or the other. Someone must give preference to one or the other. We would say that the one who has given preference to the existent creation to exist is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now again, the atheist would argue, who created him? We would say that the initial cause or the initial sani'ul mawjudat, the initial creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is existing in of himself, meaning wajibul wujud. Therefore we come to the other attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like al-qiyamu bin nafs, self-established. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need of his creation. He creates them. If we said he has need of his creation, then that would make him contingent like his creation and would make him a possibility. Then he would need a cause. And then that cause would also need a cause. And that cause would also need a cause. And this is an impossibility. Everything started from the one who is self-sufficient, al-qiyamu bin nafs. And we go on to the other attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like qidam and baqa. So far we have mentioned al-wujud, divine existence, al-mukhalafatu, al-qiyamu bin nafs. Then you have qidam and baqa. Qidam and baqa means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divine existence from eternity. He is the eternal. He had no beginning. Now the shaitan may ask, Satan asks people the question, if God created everything around you, then who created God? The answer to that would be, if God needed a creator, then that creator would also need a creator, and that creator would also need a creator. We go back to tasalsul, continuous regression, and this is an impossibility. So everything in creation must exist from an initial cause, which is self-sufficient, which is al-qiyamu bin nafs. Baqa means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remains, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall remain. Now if someone states Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to an end, this in effect would mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the creation and would come to an end. Then he would need a cause. Then that cause would also need a cause. We go back to continuous regression. So far the divine attributes that have been mentioned that you should memorize: al-wujud, divine existence; al-qidam, divine eternal existence; al-baqa, divine existence of remaining, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternally remaining; al-qiyamu bin nafs, self-established; al-mukhalafatu lil hawadith. This is the sixth attribute. Al-mukhalafatu lil hawadith is opposition to the contingent. What do we mean opposition to the contingent? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no likeness to creation in any way or form. If every Muslim memorized these divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would be equipped to refute not only atheism, Christians, Hindus. They would be able to say to a Christian, if Jesus Christ, Al-Masih, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, was the divine, if he was divine, then why does he have a beginning on earth? Because by him having a beginning, that is in opposition to the attribute of the divine, which is al-baqa, remaining eternally, or pre-eternal or existence, divine existence. In the same way, they would be able to tackle the Christian concept of crucifixion. And with Hinduism, they would be able to counter Hinduism by saying, if you liken Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the creation, then you have opposed the divine attribute of al-mukhalafatu lil hawadith. What does al-mukhalafatu lil hawadith mean? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in opposition to the contingent, meaning in opposition to creation. He has no resemblance to creation in any form. You cannot imagine a form of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now if someone asks the question, why cannot we conceive a form for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How you tackle that question is by saying, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a form, then this would mean the mind is able to contain the eternal, and this is impossible. Remember, one thing which is difficult to define or impossible to define is the eternal. How can you define the eternal? One of the best ways of talking about the eternal is by mentioning those things which the eternal is not. You can never define the eternal. The best way of tackling this is by mentioning those things which the eternal is not. Then we move on to the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is al-wahdaniyah, divine oneness. Now the ulama developed an argument from the Quran, which is known as Burhanu Tamanu'. Burhanu Tamanu' is the argument from the Quran, the proof from the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَا. If there was a divine creator other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heavens and the earth, if there was a divine creator in the heavens and the earth other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the heavens and earth would be in chaos. لَفَسَدَتَا. This alludes us to Burhanu Tamanu. What do we mean by Burhanu Tamanu? That if you had creator A and creator B, it would be impossible for such a thing to happen. Why? Because when creator A would want to build or create a planet, he would have to ask creator B. If creator B accepts, then this means creator A is not God or the divine. Why? Because he is asking the permission of someone else. If creator B refuses, then then creator A is no God, is not divine. Why? Because someone is refusing his capabilities of creating another planet. Simply put, this is known as Burhanu Tamanu, which is also a logical, deductive argument, or we would say, in fact, it's an intuitive argument, something understood. So, the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that have been mentioned and should be memorized by everyone. Al-Wujud, divine existence. Al-Qidam, Al-Baqa, Al-Mukhalafatu lil-Hawadith, Al-Qiyamu bin-Nafs, and Al-Wahdaniyah. Then we have the divine attribute of Al-Qudra, the divine power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, the Quran states, Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Surely Allah, the Almighty, is all powerful over everything. And Imam Jalaluddin Abdul Rahman al-Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala states, powerful over everything He wills. Meaning He does not will impossibilities. So if the Christian asks you the question, can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come on the earth in the form of Jesus Christ? We would say this is something which He has not willed. Something which is not in the divine will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not willed to come in the form of a man onto earth. So inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir is inclusive of possibilities only. Now the divine qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something those who deny Tawheed or those who negate Tawheed, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like people who go to saints at graves and believe the saints in the grave help in of themselves. This is shirk. If someone goes to a grave and believes that the saint helps in of himself, what has he performed? Shirk, polytheism. So this is why Al-Imam Ahmad al-Shatti, rahimahullah, the mufti of the Hanbali school, would say that he mentioned that when he saw an old woman, he sat her aside. This is the person who Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab wrote Kitab al-Tawheed and sent this book to the mufti of the Hanbali school, Ahmad al-Shatti. And Ahmad al-Shatti rectified the mistakes of Mohammed bin Abdul Wahhab, saying that when I see an old woman sitting on the side of a grave asking for the person in the grave for help, I sit her aside and teach her basic Tawheed. I teach her Tawheed, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did not declare an apostate and have her killed and destroy the grave. So this is why the subject which was allotted to me was atheism and Tawheed, oneness, monotheism. This is why it is incumbent upon the ulama to teach the public the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to teach them Tawheed and to teach them regarding those acts which are impermissible. For instance, kissing graves. Kissing graves is impermissible, haram. Circumambulating graves is an action which is haram. The Sharia, the divine law has declared this prohibited. People in Pakistan and India, they circumambulate graves or they perform prostration to the graves. This is all haram. Or kissing the grave. Even some of them bow down to people. This is an action which is impermissible in the Sharia. But such people need to be taught Tawheed, not to be made a mockery of. People make a mockery of them. They need to be taught Tawheed in the way the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught the people, the Bedouins Tawheed. And the best way of teaching Tawheed is by teaching these divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are divine attributes which Al-Imam Mohammed bin Yusuf As-Sanusi rahimahullah covered in al-Barahin, in his book al-Barahin, which is a text which should be taught throughout this country. All the ulama should teach this text, al-Barahin, also known as As-Sughra of Al-Imam As-Sanusi rahimahullah, or books like the Risala fi Tawheed of Al-Imam Ibrahim al-Bajuri, or other works. Teaching people Tawheed is one of the main objectives of the scholars of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Now, before finishing, I want to mention that every person here should make the intention, firstly, of taking part in Arabic classes. We are totally divorced from the language of the Quran. Many people do not even understand basic Arabic terms. This is why it is essential upon everyone to make the intention of learning Arabic, attend a course and learn basic Arabic. Secondly, Tajweedul Quran. Many people infamously or falsely associate bad tajweed of the Quran with people from the Indian subcontinent or people from Ahl Sunnah, especially from the Indian subcontinent. But the scholars we studied under in Sham, Syria, they were masters of tajweed. People, Qurra Sham are one of the most renowned groups of qira'at and tajweed. This is why it is essential upon us to learn tajweed. And the third essential thing which is necessary for us is to read. In fact, many people find it difficult to read. I would say if you read 12 pages a day, this is sufficient. And I have prepared a reading list which should have been distributed at the end of this conference, but due to circumstances was not prepared. Inshallah, that reading list will be released and available soon. Everyone should attempt to go through that reading list. Now, unless you suffer from some kind of mental impairment, which people who spend all their time on smartphones and this new cult of the iPhone, if most people spend their time on that, then they do not have a mental impairment. In fact, some of these shuyukh are always sitting and they're obsessively posting on Facebook. So I would say, then rather than sitting on Facebook, start picking up books, literature of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah and other literature. Remember, I'll make this very clear. The books I have placed on the reading list are not necessarily Sunni books. There are books written by non-Muslims. But for instance, if you wanted to know about scientific revolutions, read the book of Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Someone who asks about the theory of evolution, why is the theory of evolution not sufficient for us to change our creed? Read this book of Thomas S. Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. So even books which non-Muslims have written, many of them are very beneficial. So within and remember another thing, the list which will be released is not an exhaustive list. There are many other books which people can read. So start reading at least 12 pages daily. 12 pages daily. And go through some of the beneficial works which are found on that list. Remember, one thing is that generally when people state Barelvi, this idea of Barelvism has become a docile cult. A docile group that just dances to Naat and Qawwali. This is unfortunate, but this is the case. You'll see people like Muad Blake, yes, I'm going to give him some fame today, placing videos of Sufi cults on YouTube, dancing like mindless people. This is the image of people have. Before I came to this masjid, someone texted me from Birmingham saying, the masjid you are going to is a cultish mosque. Do not go there. This is the image outside of our little arena. This is the image, what they call Barelvism. Someone said to me, why do these people limit themselves to Al-Imam Ahmad Rida Khan? I said to him, if you go to Morocco or Syria and you mention Al-Imam Ahmad Rida Khan, they will not know of him. So you will mention the local scholars of that region. So there is nothing wrong with people mentioning Al-Imam Ahmad Rida Khan to people who are from that region. This is not the problem. The problem is that those people who ask that question have a severe inferiority complex due to the actions of cults within Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And on the reading list I placed a book on cult mind control also. So that's a good book to read. And these are some of the issues that should be tackled, that moving away from a cult mindset, we should move to a thinking public which is well informed. And I mentioned this on Ummah channel, and they wavered when I mentioned Gaza. I could tell that they were wavering, Ummah channel, when I mentioned Gaza. Why are Sunni Muslims not concerned regarding Gaza? So these are things which we will only open our mind if we start becoming a reading public. This is one of the main messages, and people prior to me also mentioned this. If you don't become a reading public, move away from YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. You do not learn knowledge from those means. Reading is the greatest means of learning, and the first word revealed of the Quran was Iqra. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
MashaAllah, that was the Honorable Shaykh Asrar Rashid. I call upon Imam Ijazah Mashami to come before us. Nara Takbir, Nara Risalat.
Ya Rasulallah, Ya Habiballah, Ya Rasulallah, Ya Habiballah. Salam alayk, Ya Nabi, salam alayk, Ya Rasul, salam alayk, salawatullah alayk, salam alayk, Ya Nabi, salam alayk, Ya Rasul, salam alayk, salawatullah. سلام علیک مصطفیٰ خیر الورا وہ سرور گرد و سرا ہو مصطفیٰ خیر الورا وہ سرور گرد و سرا ہو اپنے اچھوں کا تصدق ہم بدوں کو بھی نبا ہو سلام علیک یا نبی سلام علیک یا رسول سلام علیک صلوات اللہ علیک سلام علیک یا نبی سلام علیک یا رسول سلام علیک صلوات اللہ علیک سلام علیک ملک خاص کبریا ہو مالک گھر ما سوا ہو ملک خاص کبریا ہو مالک گھر ما سوا ہو کوئی کیا جانے کہ کیا ہو عقل عالم سے برا ہو سلام علیک